Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And I have a question for you. What do these things have in common? The U.S. Army, a helicopter paramedic, the chief of police, a private investigator, banking, and being a national trainer. What do you think? Well, if you guessed that it must be the guest on our show today, you're correct. And his name is Robert Tremblay. Robert has traveled an extraordinary road from a near-death to healing after several terminal diagnoses, including a journey through hospice and a near-death experience. He's the author of 20 Seconds, a true account of survival and hope. But his story isn't about dying, it's about living. So I'd like Robert to share his story in a little bit more depth than I just gave you right now. Again, his name is Robert Tremblay. So Robert, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sandra. You're such a blessing.
Oh, well, ditto back at you. And it's so interesting because when I put together what I'm going to say about a guest beforehand, you have so much. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. So I figured it'd probably be easier for you to introduce yourself and tell the story rather than me to put it all together. So I know you're originally from Vermont, but that's not where you're living now, right?
Right. I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona about a year and a half ago.
Nice place to be.
Yes. My office is outside by my pool, and I just giggle almost every day coming out to go to work. Thinking of my loved ones in 2 feet of snow. So
yes, that would be us, actually. Well, not yet, but it's coming.
Not yet, right.
No, yes, we're recording this at the end of October in 2015 because you never know when someone's going to be listening, and it's just approaching winter for us. So if you would, just give a little bit of your backstory. I mean, you've had an incredible life as far as careers. So if you would, just kind of maybe take us through that and how you got into this whole...
Sure. Yes. You bring up a valid point. There's so many aspects of the story that it's become a marketing problem. There's just so many different populations with interest in aspects of the book. But I guess, my story really began 5 years ago when I was diagnosed terminal with 30 days to live, just out of the blue. Obviously, wow. I had been sick, of course, and knew I was sick and had... Ironically, it was just hard for me. I went to the doctors, which I rarely do, and it just never got picked up. And, when I was diagnosed suddenly that quickly, that is a 20-second conversation that I won't ever forget, that emergency room in North Carolina. And it was the proverbial, you need to get your affairs in order. And, I just remember thinking, I thought that was just on TV they said that.
Oh, how scary.
Yeah, very surreal. And, we were good with, there were some experimental treatments that they tried to put me in, but it was ruled that I was too sick to continue with those and it would ruin their, thing. So I went home to make plans in North Carolina to die. And after 3 or 4 weeks of, being bedridden, and my family, my brother and my sister came to pick me up in North Carolina and drove me home to Vermont because I felt that was the place I wanted to pass away and close to family. And
where were you working at the time?
At the time, I was working as a consultant training around the country. So I was constantly in different airports and running around crazy as always.
Yeah, okay.
Training automobile dealerships and finance specialists as well as banks.
Right.
Collection efforts and how to find folks. So it was a great career following police work. So I enjoyed it, and ironically, it gave me a lot of experience in speaking in the public eye, so that certainly comes in handy today.
Yeah, funny how that happens, isn't it? Anyways, go back to your story. Yes.
So I got to Vermont after, I barely remember the trip. My brother is a retired chief of police as well, and he had plotted the course home, knowing where every hospital was in case I didn't make it. He really didn't think I would, but I did, and so they lodged me in the hospital, and that hospital in Burlington, Vermont, UVM Medical Center, thought maybe they could make a difference. And they said it would be horrendous and a challenge, but they thought it was worth a try. And by then I was so out of it, in and out of a coma, basically, that I really didn't understand what was happening, and I had pretty much given up.
Can I ask what kind of cancer you had?
Well,
Was it cancer?
This is the irony of the story. It wasn't cancer was the original diagnosis, although I've had cancer since. But I was 38 days into a 30-day death sentence when I had what I thought at the time, Sandra, was a dream. Although it was so vivid and so real that I didn't understand it, obviously, a lot like many say in retrospect now, but very confusing. But I literally woke up from this dream and asked to see every one of my doctors, which they all did, and they all stared at me in amazement that a comatose man had just woken up, and I told them that I had an experience of some nature and that I'm supposed to do something important, and that was what I was told in my experience. And I literally woke up and started fighting that day with the grace of God and all of those doctors and family and friends that supported me. And then that began the 4-year journey of recovery, really, that had some ups and downs and a journey through hospice. But I think we've now had 6 surgeries in the last 2 years to remove one carcinoma or another from my body. But the irony of the story, Sandra, was, I started sharing the near-death experience, although it was something I didn't believe in prior, to be fair.
Right. I get it.
Although I was raised religious, I just assumed it was a dying brain. But what I discovered was over the next 3 or 4 years, the after effects were so profound and so confusing and so timed and synchronistic to the research that's out there today in the after effects. And it just was so clear to me that those after effects are the proof that I needed. But
you're outside now, aren't you, by the pool doing this interview?
Yes. Is it troubling?
Yeah, it is. I'm a little bit ticked off. It's okay. I'll get over it. It's
okay. I can move inside.
No, I'm just teasing. It's like I'm just getting clouds, beautiful blue sky. You're out by the pool, airplanes going by. So I'm just a little jealous. So don't mind me.
Well, I won't mention that I'm floating on a raft.
You're not.
I am.
You are? Oh, my God.
I find it's the best place to do a radio interview.
That's amazing. Well, this is a first. And it's awesome. It's really funny, too. Okay, well, we've taken a detour. Can you, I know there's much more to share, but when you had the near-death experience, I know you said that you're told, like, you've got things to do, like, you've got a reason to live, but what was the experience like? There's so many different stories and different people. There's always different stories, but what do you remember?
Well, it's something I won't ever forget, for sure. I often describe it as realer than me and you talking today, really. And I guess I knew that's why it wasn't a dream. But regardless, I obviously had other things on my calendar just trying to survive. So I documented quite a few after effects. But the experience itself, it was very strange, and it took a long time to be able to describe it, as I'm sure you can imagine with your experiences. But I found myself in a giant expanse. It was a dark expanse of nothingness, if I define that right. It just was black and void of anything other than a vibrational hum and a certain odor that I recall and specifically, and just a sensation, almost like your hair standing up. I don't know, kind of like an electrical thing. But there was a very calming humming sound. I recall that specifically. But in the distance, I had seen what looked like a crescent edge, I guess I called it originally, almost like a red ribbon in the distance that seemed to be curved and arced and circular, but I couldn't see how big it was. And ironically, as it got bigger and bigger, I had the sense I was moving towards it, or it was moving towards me. I'm still not sure. I wasn't walking. I had no weight that I recall. But I remember this red ribbon coming towards me, and it changed colors as it got closer, similar to, I described, like a sunset. And as it, goes from red to oranges to pinks to even a purple. But by the time I got to that expanse, which seemed like forever, but yet just seconds. It's so odd to describe the timing. But anyway, as I got to the edge, without trying to, I found myself literally balancing over the edge. My feet were more than 3/4 of the way over, and there was no possible way, if this were a precipice, that I could balance. But I remember specifically thinking, I'm not falling. I'm not having a balance issue. But there was nothing. I remember thinking, is this a volcano that I'm coming to? I don't know why. That was the first thought, but that's what the ring looked like in the distance, if I can explain that correctly. So there I was standing over the edge of this now reddish pink ribbon and staring down into nothingness still. And a small light appeared and grew bigger and larger. And then seemed like it was a good distance away from me, but yet I felt like I could touch it. And it was swirling in motion and very colorful and specific. The humming increased, the static feeling increased, even the taste and the smell increased. And I watched this ball of light, circular motion, kind of like almost squeezing into a donut shaped every once in a while. But I could see a center, a defined, almost black hole center. And in that center was where a face eventually materialized.
Wow.
And it encompassed basically the entire light. And its defining points of the face and the hair were defined by a bluish streak. I kind of sometimes compare it to when you're looking at a cloud and suddenly a face appears kind of thing. But anyway, it was very clear. He was older, for sure, weathered, a longer flowing hair, but not straight, somewhat of a curl. And it was just his shoulders and above. And it was a very overwhelming sense of peace and tranquility. And I wasn't scared. And I realized this wasn't a volcano. And I honestly thought this was the face of God. And we looked at each other, and then there were words. And, which was weird because no one's lips moved and nobody, you know what I mean? It was just a different way to hear, maybe. I don't know how to describe it, Sandra. So I was always confused at first who spoke first, but the words were, "Are you ready?" And I really didn't feel any ambiguity in that question. I knew exactly what it meant.
Yeah.
And frankly, back in bed in the hospital, I was very well prepared for my end and had come to terms with it. So my response shocked me, I guess, in that I said, "No, I'm not." And I didn't think about it. It just came out, and I don't even remember moving my lips either. But anyway, a smile started forming in this light of this man's face, and started as a smirk and grew. And all he said was, "There's something important you're supposed to do." And his smile widened, and I reached out. Didn't think I could touch it, but I did. And I touched his face and his cheek, and I felt like my body and my teeth were going to fall out. It wasn't painful. It was more of a vibration, maybe?
Right, yeah.
And the smell and the odor and the taste even was, it just exploded inside of me, and the light. And the next thing I knew, I was weightless and floating and laughing. And I woke up, and I was at my bed at the hospital in Vermont. And I woke up and said, "I have to see all of my doctors right now." And that's how we began that treatment. And
wow. I want to share.
I'll never forget their faces looking at me.
I'm sure.
What the hell is going on?
I want to share something quick with you, just because the way you described the face. I was sitting on an airplane with a guy, and he had told me that his son had tried to swim when the one father was paying attention to the other son. Anyways, bottom line is the kid drowned, and they resuscitated him, brought him to the hospital. And finally, when the kid could talk, just little, like 3 or 4 years old, the father said, what were you trying to do? And I was trying to swim, Daddy. And then what happened? Well, he started swallowing the water. And then what happened? And then he said, then I started floating to the sky. And he says, the big face was there. Mm-hmm. And like the big face in the clouds. And he said, it was time for me to go back home to Daddy. And but so when you were telling this story.
From the mouths of babes.
Yeah, and you.
Right.
But it's just like that, the big face. It just, that's all I wanted to say. It's just amazing. Really
well,
amazing.
the complete irony of it was at first I didn't recognize this experience. I called it a dream. And I spoke very little about it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it was a very personal thing for me. And I struggled for a long time with what is important that I'm supposed to do? What is that carrot? And I still continue to chase that, and I'm perfectly okay with it. But I laugh about it a little, and I try to take a lot of my life as with humor, and I think, you can't be more specific up there, guys, really? Yeah. But, I find that comical. But the interesting thing was 3 years after this experience, during what we hoped was the end of most of the medical treatment. Sure. I think I was fourth or fifth surgery by this time, and so anyway, we were having a Christmas get-together, which I was so, you can imagine me sitting there 3 years later thinking, I shouldn't even be here. Yep. So, Christmas is just every day for me. So I'm sitting there and our families are exchanging our gifts, and I just feel so blessed to be there. And my mom hands out her traditional Tremblay calendar, which we all fight for the cover photo of every year. It's just a tradition in the family, a joke that we all enjoy. It has family photos all through it. And
sure.
So anyway, I'm thumbing through my newest edition, and I go to my birthday month to obviously see if I'm highlighted in there, so I can complain to my mother that I'm not getting enough press from our own family calendar.
Right.
And there is a old picture of a man that she had discovered, and I fell right back in my seat. I couldn't breathe. That man in that calendar's picture was the same man in my experience that said I was supposed to do something important. Although I didn't recognize him, I found right then and there that day, it changed everything again. That man was my grandfather, who died 28 years before I was born.
Oh my gosh. I'm flooded with goosebumps right now.
That was when I put it together, that it was a near-death experience. And obviously, I was dealing with a lot of after effects at that point, and frankly thought I might have cracked with all the 4 years of trauma. But, when I connected with the near-death community and found out that I'm not going crazy, that these are normal, and it was so weird to read some, I don't read others' experiences, Sandra, which I find strange, but I just can't do it. I don't know why, but I've read a couple of books, only 2 or 3, Anita Morhani's, Dr. Alexander's, and I have read 2 or 3 of PMH Atwater's books on after effects. But I just can't read others' stories or other NDE books, and I don't know why. I think it's kind of ironic. But anyway, when I was reading PMH Atwater's 40-year research on after effects, I thought she had hacked into my computer. I mean, they were spot on in the exact timing, exact sequence of her 40-year research on the after effects. And it dawned on me at that point that this is the real proof people are looking for. And it's so ironic to me that they all read the experience, the drama, the man in the light, and I get it, but those folks who are struggling for answers, I encourage them all in my conversations and speeches around the world the proof is in the bubbles.
Well, not to ask a dumb question, but what do you mean by after effects? I've never heard it put that way. So well, I think I know what you're talking about, but I'd like it if you could spell it out in what we're
There are timed and synchronistic after effects that have been found in common with almost every near-death experiencer. And it's so frighteningly synchronistic and similar that it's hard to not pay attention to it. And this was kind of where I gravitated towards in my speaking and education throughout. was, if you're looking for proof of the afterlife, science, when we can't see something in science, we generally use something, and you may have heard this before, like a gas. If we want to study a gas, but we can't see it, what science does is they actually inject it into water, and they creates bubbles. They can study the bubbles. And I find that very astute and synchronistic to the after effects of a near-death experience, in that the proof really is in the bubbles. It's not in the experience. And I sense that a lot of people find great comfort from the reading different experiences. But as you know, Sandra, they're also remarkably different.
Oh, big time. Like as many different people, there's as many different experiences.
And I think people read a lot of them grasping for the similarities. And there are some, bare roots, bones, similarities in NDEs. But the proverbial tunnel that people experience, almost 80% of the tunnel is never experienced in a near-death experience. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who did see a tunnel, it isn't valid. It's just they have done so much research now on the after effects that they're just begging to be paid attention to.
Can you give us some examples of what after effects are? Like what some of those things are?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I noticed about myself was a childlike innocence. Like I was seeing things for the first time. And I don't care if it was a blade of grass or a specific sunset. It just all seemed alive and magical. And I could find an hour's worth of time on a blade of grass. It was very weird. But to a guy who, spent his career 100 miles an hour with his hair on fire.
Right.
I'd sit out in nature and be lost for hours and think, well, this isn't normal behavior.
Right.
So, that was one of the first things. Some of the other things that they talk about, and there are hundreds, by the way, of after effects, and I encourage people to read up on them. That's your real proof to me. But, one of the big things that a lot of people gravitate towards is most near-death experiencers start having psychic abilities.
Okay.
And, the drama of that and the excitement of that, I think, tunnel visions people into that curiosity. But that is a pretty heavy after effect at first when you start understanding energy and auras and things you just never spent time contemplating, and you realize, I guess, that there's a oneness to this world, and the separate divisiveness that we live in every day. We just know, and I think you do too, it's inherently wrong. We all come back with this idea of a oneness, and it's overwhelming. Many of us come back with delusions of grandeur, and that we must tell this story. And maybe delusions of grandeur isn't the best title for that, but
I know what you mean. Just that real feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta share.
Just like yours
to
reach out to people and share your story, and now you're sharing other people's stories. I mean, that was one of the most profound for me, was understanding the reflection of life. And most near-death experiencers just kind of get it. It is fairly simple. What you give out, you get back. And it's so overwhelming for us that we feel like we want to spend time helping humanity in some way. We want to tell our story. We want to try to save people that crazy journey that unfortunately some have to just go through.
Yes, right. It's interesting you say what you give out, you get back. And every single person that I've interviewed who's had a near-death experience are so passionate about making a difference in other people's lives. It's like the one thing that resonates through the commonality of all of them. I mean, it's amazing.
Probably the biggest after effect for sure.
Yeah, and the memory. And people, either they had a near-death experience when they were 5 years old, or they recently had it. It stays more real in their memory than something that had just happened. I mean, and that's mind-blowing as well.
True.
How real it just stays, the experience. Wow.
And you still get little gifts occasionally. The after effects, if you really study them. And I do encourage PMH Atwater just has done so much exclusive research on these things that it's hard to ignore. But that lovingness that you feel, and I think one of the biggest issues for me was just, and maybe it's just this simple. For a guy like me, I wake up every day and just say thanks. And maybe it's just that simple. Is living in a world of gratitude every day. Man, I just don't see ugly things anymore. And I'm so grateful. That is, to me, the best gift of all.
Yeah. What do I ask you next?
Wow. Right.
Yeah. How about that? I
Right.
mean, I'm picturing this world, and I'm really touched and moved. And it's like, okay. And now I'm at a loss. Like, you have me so in the moment. Where do we go?
Well, I know, and it's so funny that a few times that I've had these interviews, and I've done several, obviously, but if I get on with two other women talking or another two men talking, they'll take over the whole conversation because it's inspirational, not what I've been through, but the story itself. And that hope, I think, is just exciting. So I just want to share the story, but I try to be careful about taking a position on anything. I don't want to convince anybody of anything. That's not the idea of my book. So,
and it doesn't work.
No. And that whole, we try to save people from that journey, Sandra, I just don't think that cuts it.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's like
they have to have their own experience.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require almost dying.
No, but it's like going to school. There's a difference between a kid that never goes to school and a kid that goes to school. So, like, without the books, without me learning about things, my own education into this world really helped me get to a place that I wouldn't have been before. So I think your book, your speaking, all of that can help propel a person. Now, some of those real hardcore experiences, I think there are certain things we're meant to learn, and that's why some of the things hurt so bad and things like that. Like, we have to do some for ourselves.
Well, and they obviously are the most profound, impactful moments of our lives.
Yes, sure they are.
The darker the clouds, the better the sunset, I've heard said before.
Oh, that's really nice. Let's write that down. Darker the clouds, the better the sunset.
Better the sunset or sunrise.
Yeah, it's good.
But it's true. That's what provides the color. And, the irony of the yin and yang of this world, I find comical. But, I still go through different episodes like everybody does in life. But I just, it's so weird for me now. I don't know if this is wrong to say, but I have for most of my life followed one piece of advice from my father. Mm-hmm. And he told this to me when I went into basic training in the Army. He said, "Son, make a game of it. Life is just a game. It's all an illusion. But if you make a game of it, you're always going to have fun with it, and people have fun with you." And I've just, maybe I laughed when I shouldn't have laughed when I was in hospice for 2 months. Maybe I giggled when the doctors, had no hope. But I'd laughed all the way through this whole experience, and I think it spoke volumes in my family's connectivity that legitimately saved me. And I struggled for a while thinking, how do you explain that love can save?
Yes.
And not sound corny about it. Yeah. And I don't mean to sound weird, but all the studies today on the placebo and the nocebo, I found great peace recently in doing my research on another book where Harvard University did a study about, finally, somebody did a study on why the placebo works. Imagine that. And I'm encouraging that research, by the way, and trying to propagate that in my conversations around the country I'm tired of every drug being in a placebo by law, but nobody studies why the placebo is even in place.
Right.
Yeah, we're missing the entire turkey dinner here. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting. Harvard just did a study recently and published, and they said the irony of the placebo is that it works even when the consumer knows it's a placebo. And what they were able to determine that in almost 96% of the cases where a placebo is affected, it's affected by the caregiver or nurturer who gave the medication, not by the medication. So I think that's powerful, powerful study. And I'm pushing it as we talk around the world that it wasn't the pill and it's never been the placebo. It's always been the caregiver, the person who hands you the pill, the person who believes in you, who loves you and supports you. And there is some scientific doctrine that will attach to my story of, can love be enough to save you? I suspect, again, I don't take a position on it, but it's fairly clear in the book that, the love of my sister Kate, Tom picking me up, not knowing if I'd make it home, all of the individual people I realized after my experience came to me for a reason at exactly the right time, at exactly the right place, manner, and sequence. And that is one of the biggest things I discovered was that whole philosophy, do we all cross paths for a reason? It was undisputable to me. And I talk about that a lot as well. It's been one of the best gifts.
Oh, what a wonderful thing. And even you talking about love can save. And I'm thinking of you being humorous when you were in hospice. There's the given way I think most people go down that road is fear, thinking about what you've done and what you haven't done. And I mean, it's frightening. And what a gift to be with someone who has life as a game and makes a game of it. I mean, it's like extremely empowering. And I think one of the things both of us share is when we can really believe that this life isn't just it, there are going to be less times of fear in cases like that. Because you know what? We're all going to go, right? Eventually. Right. And
well, you hit on a topic that I think, and again, it's hard to not take a position on this, but
just do it. Live it out. Yeah, you can always change down the road.
I think this is the absolute key to everything.
Okay.
One of the things that I came back with, and many of us have, as you know, is we lost our fear of death.
Right.
It's gone. But what's ironic is fear in general became a encompassing issue for me for several years after the near-death experience.
What do you mean?
Well, and what I mean by it is I wasn't afraid. I found just the opposite of things that I normally was afraid of. Just weren't an issue anymore.
Oh, that's good news.
As an example, I started writing about my near-death experience. And that is not something I would have put out there before and put myself in that limelight of ridicule and doubt. But to be honest, I never considered it once, and I still don't. But the irony of my story was I wasn't telling the whole story, and I didn't until the book, and it took some time to come to terms with. But it was the part of the story that will shock and amaze, but it's the medical remarkableness of this fact, Sandra, was that 5 years ago when I was diagnosed in North Carolina terminal, I was a married, successful, heterosexual man who was told in an emergency room he was dying of end-stage AIDS.
Oh.
Now, I had never been a risk factor, according to the doctors. We have never tested. I had been married for 10 years. I had never been an IV drug user, obviously. I had never been in those factors of what doctors consider risk factors.
Right.
And I thought that was a prevalent fact of my story in why I was diagnosed so late. The fact is, with HIV and AIDS today, you can live a normal, healthy life if it's caught early enough. And a clear lesson in my story was those risk factors, quote unquote, just don't exist. Because as we've discovered over the last couple of years, and you may not know this, in fact, most people I tell this to really shocks them, Sandra.
Okay.
40% of all new HIV infections are heterosexual females, ages 13 to 24 years old.
No, I have not heard that.
Yeah. How come?
Yeah.
that's why I want to talk about it. And, you know, the remarkable part of the story is that I survived tuberculosis, 6 surgeries for one carcinoma or another. I had diabetes. The diseases, I blew up my retinas. They were bleeding. I was blind for 4 months. But here's the deal. Everything is gone, obviously, except the HIV. And I healed everything. But the remarkable part that I wasn't telling was that I did it all without a functioning immune system. And that was the medical part that my doctors encouraged me to talk about.
Sure.
What it doesn't explain things. Now, we see a lot of near-death and spiritually awakened people having remarkable healings. I've seen several on your show.
Right.
And I often hear friends of mine say, boy, that immune system, it is something. But how do you explain my story?
Exactly.
I today have 1/10 of your immune system, and I've survived all of that. So that's the position that we're careful not to take, but we leave it up to you to make your determinations. You know, how do you survive tuberculosis? How do you survive and see again after bleeding retinas and cancer 6 times? And I mean, it's just ridiculous, the things I went through. And sometimes I don't even realize, you know, how long it was of a process. But so the first part of the book tells, you know, what I went through, and it brings you in. But, you know, the remarkable part of it was just such a sad situation that never had to happen. And if I can talk about it around the country and raise awareness that this disease has evolved, and that our continual focus on marketing different segments of our society may not be the answer here. I want to talk about it with high schools and colleges. I feel compelled to do it, and that's what the book was all about. Frankly, you know, I donate 1/3 of my Amazon proceeds to a charity from the book's sales called Give a Buck. We have called it Gab because we want to start gabbing about the new HIV statistics that are out there. I guarantee you, if you are in a group of 20 adults and you tell them that 40% of new infections are females, they will say the same thing you did, Sandra. No, we did not know that. And that's my real question. Why? So we're going to try to do something about that, try to make a difference.
Oh, sure. And you really have to follow your passion. I think each one of us is given certain things that we're to do with, you know, like our time's not up yet. You know, we've got things to do. You know, are you ready? No, I'm not. But they're all different. And
Right.
I know, and so many people are afraid to read a book or write a book, but it's like, if you feel passionate about writing it, there's someone who needs to read it. If you feel passionate about sharing this, there's people that need to hear it. So I really acknowledge you for the difference you're making. And even with the people you haven't even met yet, or you may never see, that you're empowering. And even
well, it just seems so obvious, Sandra, that your comment earlier about fear, boy, you couldn't have nailed it on the head. And you know, everybody can talk about it and, you know, tell you the answers to life, and you're just not going to get it till you figure it out for yourself. But fear, I think, is one of the biggest diseases in this world. And I write about it with a lot of extensive medical data from some other great sources in the book. And here's the only position that I take in the book, Sandra. And I will say this, and be happy to say this.
Okay.
The only position I take in the book is we are more remarkable than we were told. That's all I want to point out.
That's so basic yet so humongous.
It just is so simple. And this whole fear-oriented nonsense, I smell it from a mile away. It is the absolute answer to me about finding quality of life, is recognizing, in my opinion, that fear is an illusion.
Yeah, it sure is. And it can seem crippling, though. And boy, does it cause an uproar in the body and in the emotions and things like that.
And don't think the marketers of our world haven't figured this out yet.
Oh, of course they have. But you know what's something I've realized is when I'm actually doing the thing I was afraid of, like fear isn't present in that moment.
Right.
For instance, if I want to call somebody and, I had to apologize and I was afraid to call somebody. And I mean, it took like a month before I could actually pick up the phone because I was afraid. But, the moment I pressed the send button on my phone and the person answered, the fear was gone because I was so present in that conversation. And it always worked out. I mean, it worked out. But, I let fear cripple me for about a month.
Yeah. The fear and the moment and being present, huge, just absolutely huge. If you're in that present moment, I believe that's where your body heals. And scientifically, I do point out that, even down to the basic human cell, it only operates in two functions, Sandra, one of fear or fight or flight and one of growth. And there's no in between. And this isn't a theory. This is scientific fact that they've been able to determine that right down to the very cell. What happens when you're in a fear or fight or flight state, your cell stops all growth. There's no reason to keep growing and splitting if you're being chased by a lion. So the body actually diverts blood flow and all your endocrine system flow to face that fear. So you can see what happens to the human body when the illusion of fear is in place. Now, don't get me wrong. Danger is real.
Sure. Yeah.
Fear is an illusion, and it is perceived and manifested by us. And I have a fairly decent understanding of that, and it's helped my life greatly.
Any advice if we're in the midst of fear to, because that sounds pretty scary, fear stopping the growth of a cell, and maybe I'm not being chased by a lion, but I'm afraid. Any tools for moving to that growth as opposed to being in the fear? I mean, I don't know.
That's a great question because, I often remind people, and it sounds silly and stupid maybe, but, you're still batting 1,000. You've made it through everything. And I believe if you're honest with yourself, even the hardest moments of your life, unless they happened in the last few weeks, I think you'll agree that it was the best thing that ever happened. And it's just that time to find those conclusions. And, the rough times are going to come, Sandra. Mm-hmm. I know it. You know it. But it's your attitude during them that's what's important. And, I have a very firm foundation on thought and the power of thought. And what we think about, we manifest, and I get it. So if I'm having issues with fear or things like that, I remind myself, be careful what you think of, Robert, because it'll happen. So I just try to clean my mind up in my attitude of, if something terrible is about to happen, then I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% sure that it was meant for me at exactly this time so that I would evolve to my fullest potential.
Boy, is that a powerful way to live life. Because I know, and I've talked about this before, it's so easy to become a victim, and you can stew on something for 30 years. But if you're to say to yourself, like, okay, this is showing up for a reason. What am I going to learn out of it? How come I put this here?
Yep.
Just saying.
And the quicker you learn from it and let it go, I think life is all about recovery. You're never going to avoid these situations.
Wow.
But how fast you recover is in direct proportion to your commitment to the quality of your life.
Really great words. Really great words. Wow, our time's going by fast. Okay, more questions you need me to ask you.
Family. I think, that was such a big impact for me in not only the placebo and the caregiver nurturer, but, when I originally wrote my book, Sandra, I wanted to pay tribute to those, my brother who drove me almost dead home and, all of those people who dealt with that. My poor mother, you have children. It was so hard for a mom to watch that. And so that was really the true start of the book, was to just say, look at what the difference you can make in somebody's life. And I struggled at first because, as you probably know, Sandra, when you get sick, people treat you different. And there's nothing you can do about it. Some people just handle it differently, and I get it. But when you're dying, Holy cow. You watch what happens. People will take one of two routes. Run, and I get it, or they'll support. And the power of a 20 seconds moment of somebody just reaching out and saying, how's your day? You can do it. Or something positive. I'm just thinking about you. Just wanted to tell you I loved you. Those quick moments were just as impactful as that 20-second dialogue in that emergency room that day. So I respect people who run from the dying. I get it. But it doesn't mean I'm going to be quiet about what the difference is if you choose differently.
Right. I know people, my dad diagnosed twice with cancer, and once 30 years prior, he got 30 days to live like you did, and he didn't, and I know from his stories, he had some friends run, and he had a couple ones that stayed close. And even this last time, which ended up being the end of him, I could see people running. Yeah. People, and I'm not one to blame somebody. Unless you're in somebody's shoes, you really do not know how a situation is occurring, and people don't know how to handle it. And talk about flight, taking flight.
It is so funny. And I think I might have been like that too. We grow up in a world where your first experience at a funeral, at least mine, was, this sobbing, crying, miserable, oh my Lord, it's so awful death experience. That's your first experience with death.
Yeah.
And, just imagine having a different view like you and I do, and then try to explain that to someone who's grieving. It's impossible.
Yeah. And sometimes the best thing to say is, you know what? I don't know what to say. I don't know what you're feeling, but I love you and I'm here for you.
Right.
You don't have to pretend to have any answers. You don't need to give any wisdom, any words, any advice. You just say, I'm here for you. And
that's so astute of you to say, because it is an awkward thing, isn't it? When you talk with someone who's just gone through a loss. And, for me, I want to say, I hope this doesn't sound mean, but I have to bite my tongue to say, oh, congratulations for them. I don't obviously say that. That would be just cruel. But for those of us who've been there and know what's waiting for...
There's something good.
Oh, man. Yeah. And why wouldn't you want to share that? It's, one of the most specific things you will hear in near-death experiences, the majority of them are peaceful, pleasant, unbelievably pleasant experiences.
Right.
And I'm all about that. But one thing I do believe, and I will say, is, people ask me all the time, well, heaven, what was heaven like? And I find it funny because I'm not sure I went to heaven. And so I've had to form opinions on things in this realm. But based off of my research, it seems to me that heaven, whether you like it or not, is going to be exactly what you think you deserve. And I suspect that's a fairly heavy responsibility that most don't find very appealing. And I could be completely wrong, but it's ironic that these near-death experiencers are also uniquely different and framed in their own frame of mind from the experiencer themselves. If they grew up in the winter, their near-death experience was snowy. My experience, I thought I was on the edge of a volcano. And frankly, I was deciding whether to live or die based on the shame of getting HIV.
Sure.
And, I had whatever experience happened in that hospital. I will say this happened at exactly the right time, manner, and timing that I needed to find the hope to start trying to survive. And nobody could have given it to me but that experience. And I'm forever changed by it.
Wow. Robert, thank you so much.
It was awesome talking with you.
Just wonderful. So sometimes I like to ask a guest, if you were to give somebody just a little bit of homework, one simple thing we can do today, just one, or one thing we can think about. Do you have any idea what that would be from you?
Yeah. Well, there would be a few, but going back to my purpose and my cause in life, I'll say it with this caveat, Sandra, that recently I told you more than 40% of new HIV infections are female 13 to 24 years of age. But here's something a little more alarming. 60% of those females in the United States don't know they're infected.
Oh my gosh.
So guess what my word to you is?
Go get yourself checked.
Please, for God's sakes, we don't need to be math geniuses to know that 40% of 35 million people don't, and 60% of them don't know they're infected, and they're in childbearing years. I don't think that math has to be real smart to know that in 3 years those numbers will triple.
Yeah, so certainly share, right?
It's a tipping point, and this is it. And I hope this book pushes it over the edge. The irony is that I seem to get a lot of flack from the gay community about not focusing on their community. And, that's one of the real reasons why it's gone out of control in the other communities. And I will point out that, when we start marketing to the whole instead of to one individual dynamic in society, I think that just makes more sense.
Yeah, and the whole controversy of that will just get the message out further. So let them say what they want to say and all that, and trust the process.
You're so right and so astute on that point. It's God help me the day we take ownership of a disease to the point of that. I just want people to understand it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's not about getting famous, standing up and telling the world you made mistakes. God knows I have. But I'm okay with it if I can make this mistake that I made into something valuable for somebody else.
You know what, Robert? We wouldn't enjoy listening to you if you were perfect. Like, nobody wants to hear a story of somebody rich and that's always been, tell me about the guy who had nothing and made something of himself. That's inspirational. And that gives people hope that they may not be in your shoes or even similar, but to hear from the depths of what you experienced to where you are now. And it's about making a difference. That's inspiring. And that makes people look at their own life, I think, and look to see where they can make a difference. And
exactly.
To know, are you ready? No, I'm not. I love that.
And it was so weird because I just, I almost questioned myself. So, that was a funny moment.
Yeah. Let me ask you just a quick question that I written down. You had spoken earlier about a near-death community. Many people, including myself in the beginning, I had no idea how many people really have had near-death experiences.
Right.
And if somebody wants to find out more about near-death experiences, besides typing it into Google, what do you mean by the near-death community? Are there actually groups?
There actually is a very established community that's over 50 years old. There are several main pillars in the community. Many can find good help and resources on Facebook. They have several near-death experience groups if you just search them out. But the other pillars of information and research in the near-death community would be, I guess, not necessarily in any semblance of order, but IANDS, or the International Association of Near-Death Science. That is one of the major groups in the world. There's also a group called NDERF, or short for Near-Death Experience Research Foundation.
Okay.
They have an extensive website of experiences and data as well. And then, of course, there's near-death.com, run by Kevin Williams, another fascinating data bank of thousands and thousands of experiences.
Yeah, great.
So that will help. And then, of course, if you just Google NDE or near-death experience, there's thousands of books out there. It's really becoming a boiling point in the last year or two, and it's really exploded. So I think the message that we have something to share is getting out there, and so there's plenty of places to go.
Yeah, and I asked that just because I know that Just from people that I've talked to, I've not had a near-death experience. However, hearing the stories really helped me believe.
Wow.
And there's some things I have personally experienced, and I've had people that are afraid of dying or have lost a loved one, and by nature of me sharing my story, it's taken away other people's fear. So you don't have to pray to have a near-death experience, because they're often painful leading up to it, but just by hearing other people's words. So on my website, which is wedon'tdieradio.com, you can go to Robert Tremblay's episode and see who it is we're talking to. And I also have all the links to the things that he's shared. And also, why don't you share with us what your website is?
Sure. It's on 20-seconds.net. And most of my work is done via Facebook or my blog, which you can attach from there.
I sure will.
And the charity is, of course, attached to 20-seconds.net as well.
Do you spell out the word 20, or do you do 20?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 20-seconds. Yeah, that dash kind of messes people up, but
that's all right. We'll get it out there.
Right. And then, of course, we have the Gab gear. So we sell T-shirts and hats and tote bags and wine gift bags, and all marked with Gab on it to start a conversation. And generally people say, what is Gab? And that's a perfect introduction to say, wow, did you know? So that's what we're hoping for.
Wow. Well, Robert Tremblay, thank you. You're awesome. You're awesome.
Great. I just knew we were going to get together, and I'm so happy that it just worked out like it always does. It is great. It really is. And to our listener, I want to really thank you for taking the time to listen. I know all episodes are different. Some of them really phenomenal, and some of them you think, oh, what was Sandra thinking having this person on? But you know what? That's life. And I do believe that for every time you listen, if you can listen in and think, there's going to be a gift in here for me. Right. And that's even when you meet somebody. Robert, when I'm sitting next to somebody on the airplane, sometimes the last thing I want to do is talk to them. But I think, you know what? There could be gold in this for me. There could be something, some reason I need to be sitting next to this person. Something either I share with them that makes a difference in their life, or vice versa. So, like I said, thank you for listening. With all episodes, I do hope you're looking for the gold for your life. And a reminder to go check out Robert Tremblay's book, 20 Seconds. This is awesome. And in closing, this is Sandra Champlain. I have been your host on We Don't Die Radio. And I do believe that life is an education for our souls, and that every single one of us, our lives here on earth are important. And if you were being asked, are you ready? Really? Are you ready to go and let go of this life? I would assume you'd also say, no, I'm not. And I ask you to look inside, look for your passion, and go out and make a difference with another person. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.